Hey guys, what's up? I'm CJ and welcome back to my galaxy. Today we're discussing the Hunger Games and an in-depth analysis I have for this. A 15-page, 9,000 word script to go off of. I'm not going to be reading totally off of it, but it's a lot of points to get to. This is going to be the longest video on my channel ever. So this is going to be quite a bit. Also, just as a side note, I am going to be reading some quotes off of my laptop, off of my script, because I have some quotes. We're going to be going off of the sequence of events, and then I'm going to have different title pages for each one. So there's going to be like, we're starting with the beginning, and then we're going to have the characters who are at the beginning, like Gale, Prim, Katniss's mother, those sort of characters. And then as we go through the sequences of events, we're going to analyze each character as they come up. But Katniss and Peter are going to be at the end, although some of their analysis will be woven in to the video, and then we'll complete the video with them. District 12 and the Reaping. So the first scene of the Hunger Games kind of starts off slowly with like a black backdrop with text to tell us kind of what the Hunger Games is. It's an easy way for exposition to be put into the world building for Panem. We're in the country of Panem, which is not set in the movie, but we're not going off the book, we're going off the movie. I'm going to do an entire other analysis of the book at some point. We're just going off the movie. But for those of you who don't know, Panem is North America, and essentially what is left of North America after global warming kind of sea levels rise. And we're left with like a strip of the United States, a little bit of Canada, maybe a little bit of Mexico as well. That's essentially what the country is. So the title page has as follows: from the Treaty of Treason, in penance for their uprising, each district shall offer up a male and female between the ages of 12 and 18 and a public reaping. These tributes shall be delivered to the custody of the capital and then transferred to a public arena where they will fight to the death until a lone victor remains. Henceforth and forevermore, this pageant shall be known as the Hunger Games. The rest of the introduction to the movie starts off with Caesar Flickerman interviewing Senator Crane, who we get to know is in his third year of being a game maker. We're going into the 74th Hunger Games, and Caesar Flickerman asks him what his personal signature is. He doesn't get to answer the question because it skips over to Prim screaming after having a nightmare and Katniss comforting her, which essentially ties in his signature being murdering children, scaring children, taking away children's innocence. This true nature of the Hunger Games gives us a glimpse into how the capital keeps the districts in line after them rebelling to ensure that a rebellion doesn't happen again. And as we know, it's lasted for 74 years, so it's not like it hasn't worked up until this point for the capital. Going back to when Prim is screaming after a nightmare, we first see Katniss's relationship with her sister during this scene to see the real attachment that she has to her sister and comforting her sister. Katniss sings Deep in the Meadow, which is something that is not too important right now aside from developing their relationship, showing us the comfort and the closeness that the two have. It's something that we're supposed to call back to later in the movie when Rue dies, but we'll get to that later. This is quickly followed by a sequence of Katniss leaving her home and going out to hunt in the woods outside of the district boundary. This showcases a lot of her skills right from the get-go, showing us that she has a lot of skills that people from her district just don't have, or at least the rest of them, other than Gale. We see Katniss providing for her family this way, that she is trying to bring home meat, whatever, game, that's what it's called. She's trying to bring home game in order to provide for her family, sell the game to peacekeepers for money. Peacekeepers, we don't really get too much detail about peacekeepers, but it's implied that they're law enforcers from the capital. In seeing Katniss outside of the boundary, we do notice that there is a boundary for the districts, knowing that the capital maintains control for the districts by keeping them in isolation from one another, which is not something that we get into too much detail with until the later movies. A lot of this stuff is very basic, surface level in this movie because it is a foundation for more in-depth stuff later on in Catching Fire, we get to know a lot more that they're purposely, and in Mockingjay, they're purposely isolating them so they can't band together against the capital, because the districts have more manpower than the capital, so obviously they had to separate them. Now onto Gale Hawthorne's introduction, which I wish I could leave this out of the movie, but out of my analysis, out of the movie entirely. I didn't mean to say movie, but if he could not be in the movie at all, that would be great. I'm just saying. But I wish we could leave Gale out of the analysis, but he is actually quite a significant character for symbolism and for symbolizing war, and it's peace versus war, essentially. So when Katniss tries to shoot a deer out of nowhere, Gale, this is gonna be a long day. Gale pops out of the bushes scaring off the deer, and in Liam Hemsworth's really bad American accent, I'm telling you, I can hear the accent. If I can hear the accent, everyone else can hear the accent. Gale pops up saying, who do you think you're gonna sell the deer to? And then we get more about the peacekeepers, although not much even. We don't hear a lot about the peacekeepers as law enforcers, we just see them as law enforcers. It's implied, and I don't always get that sort of subtext. Gale Hawthorne, love triangle or fleeting obligatory feelings. Gale's relationship with Katniss goes more in depth in the future 3 movies, but we're told straight off the bat that they're quite close and that we know that they're hunting buddies. You know, they help each other keep each other's families safe. They're close enough for Gale to also have a nickname for Katniss, being Catnip. I told you I wasn't gonna say anything about the book, but it is said in the book, not in the movie, which is ridiculous, that Katniss mumbled her name and Gale heard Catnip instead of Katniss. So that's why her nickname's Catnip, because she was a shy little 12-year-old. I'm just saying, I'm just adding a little bit of context, even though I'm not supposed to, because this is just about the movie, not the book. To make up for scaring away the deer, Gale throws a rock into the bush or the forest, whatever, and it scares a bunch of birds, and Katniss shoots the birds with her bow and arrow, making us aware that Gale is aware that she has skills with a bow and arrow, that people around her, close to her, know she can use a bow and arrow. It's something that is supposed to be a part of her skill set from the get-go. This relationship definitely is a one out of necessity. It was made because they had to survive, which is a lot of relationships in the capital or produced by the capital are out of survival, which we'll get more into at the end of this video about Peter and Katniss. But Gale and Katniss's relationship is kind of weird. It's kind of weird, mate. I'm sorry, but it is. The introduction of Gale is followed by a little bit more exposition about the Hunger Games, about how they could run off together, but they say that they have to provide for their families. They couldn't bring their siblings with them because it'd be too difficult. Gale goes into how he doesn't want kids, and Katniss is like, where did this come from? That's weird. They also go into the Tesseract system, which isn't something that is explicitly said either, in the same way peacekeepers are. In the same way, peacekeepers don't have anything explicit said about them. Because the Tesseract system, we know that Prim has had her name in once. From her nightmare, she was chosen. Or foreshadowing from earlier, her nightmare. Katniss's name is in a bunch of times as well, I don't remember. And Gale's is in 42 times, which I have written down. I don't know why I don't have Katniss's written down, but Gale is 42, Prim is 1, and we know that they accumulate over time due to the Tesseract system, which is something that they can do for getting grain. They put their name in more times to get grain for bread. And it depends on how many members of your family there are and how old you are. The older you are, the more times your name is in the pool to be able to get chosen to be a tribute in the Hunger Games. And once you get to 18, like Gale, your name is in an ungodly amount of times. Their conversation then goes into the political system of the capital. They seem to be safe. They seem to feel like they're safe outside the boundary of District 12. They're not being watched by the capital, or at least they think they aren't, because they're outside the boundary. There are no cameras out there. Gale shows very outward, immediate concern for the Hunger Games and how they could rebel against the capital, and he is very action first, think later sort of character. When Katniss is trying to reel in Gale and be like, that's not gonna work, it's not a logical plan, but Gale has that like fiery attitude towards destroying the capital because of the way he was raised, and he was raised under an oppressive system, and he wants to fight back. Gale's a very ambitious character, and especially compared to Katniss's reservations with expressing her political opinions. It's something, once again, the book, I'm sorry, I have to refer to the book sometimes. Not really, but we'll get more into the book later, and not later, in another video, okay? Katniss's political opinions are more internal, and she teases Gale for being so ambitious. She clearly has political opinions, because there are lines where she states the oppressiveness of the capital and how that's affected her, but she's in survival mode in order to get back to her sister after being reaped as a tribute for the Hunger Games. This shows Katniss's survival nature compared to Gale's fighting standpoint against the capital. Katniss has only ever wanted to survive, which is an important note for the rest of this analysis, because it presents her, once again, in comparison to Gale, as an accidental hero. Gale is someone who in history, we would see people like Gale and go, oh, he was ready to fight, he was ready for this. In history, we have a lot of historical figures like Gale. I'm sure if you look into it, you could find someone like Gale Hawthorne. But Katniss is someone that is an accidental hero that was in the right place at the right time, which I'll get more into later during the Peter and Katniss analysis. I keep saying that, then I'm like, I'll get more into it, but I'm skipping back. That's what happens when you skip back and forth with things, okay? Calm down. Jumping back to Katniss's obligatory feelings with Gale is that the conversation I previously mentioned about kids, it does introduce them, not express them as love interests, because why else would you discuss kids with people? In films, typically you're not going to put lines in like that if you're not going to have them associate with kids together in the same space in some way, and typically that is when you're presenting them as love interests. You're going to say that Katniss, for example, doesn't want kids because of the oppressiveness of the capital, which is something that also is her political opinion. Her opinions are reserved. She doesn't explicitly say that she's not going to have kids because the world is a disaster. She's gonna say that she just doesn't want to have kids. But we know, if we pay attention, that the reason she doesn't want kids because she has to raise Prim herself under such oppressive circumstances. But Gale wants kids because he doesn't think that it's going to last, because he's going to fight back against the world so he can have kids to have that lifestyle that he wants. And then it really shows how they see the world compared to each other. With the topic of obligatory feelings is that Katniss is only really associating with Gale, that she feels she has to stick with her friend. You know, she's a very loyal character. She feels like she has to stay loyal to Gale, agree with him in a way, because her opinions against the capital essentially are the same, but they are expressed in different ways. So she agrees with him to not argue, so she teases instead. The conversation about kids also muddies the water a little bit about how Gale sees Katniss. That if there's a random conversation about kids, where is it coming from? Why is he thinking about that in relation to Katniss? And obviously Katniss, if you've ever been a teenager, which we were all teenagers at some point, you understand that when it comes to just friends and males talking to you, you're like, your guy friend's talking to you about kids, you're like, well, why are you talking about that all of a sudden? That's a little weird. That's how Katniss is presented with Gale. He's a bit of a pick-me. The Reaping. Leading up to the Reaping, Katniss purchases a Mockingjay pin, her famous iconic Mockingjay pin, from an old woman in what we know as the Hob in the book. Once again, I'm sorry about bringing up the book when we're talking about the movie. Mockingjays aren't really ever told to the audience. We're not told what Mockingjay is. It's essentially a Jabberjay and a Mockingbird. Jabberjays were a capital mutt. Mutts, mutations, they genetically engineered animals for capital use, and they released them into the wild, and they bred with mockingbirds. They weren't supposed to survive the Jabberjays, but instead they did survive, and now we have the Mockingjays. It's like a combination of capital and district that wasn't supposed to exist. In between these scenes, we do get glimpses at Effie as she's going towards the Hall of Justice where the Reaping will take place later. Whilst we'll get more into Effie in a minute, she does have that wild capital fashion already. Crazy capital fashion. She's supposed to be distinctly different from the districts. We're going to skip ahead a little bit to the actual Reaping itself and then skip back to when Katniss arrives home to talk to Prim and her mother before the Reaping, because I want to discuss Katniss's mother and Prim separately. The Reaping abruptly starts with Effie on the microphone very loudly, because Effie is eccentric and she's Effie. Essentially, it first starts with a presentation from President Snow or about the Dark Days. The Dark Days, explained by President Snow, is essentially 13 districts in the capital where the rebels were defeated, resulting in the Hunger Games. Whilst oppression isn't explicitly stated, because why would a dictatorship and an authoritarian state explicitly state that they're oppressing their people, it is stated that the 13th district was destroyed in order to maintain control over the 12 districts, allowing the capital to assert their authority over the remaining 12. There is a clear difference in opinions on the Hunger Games, seeing as the capital sees the Hunger Games as essentially a television show, as entertainment, because it's how the capital presents it to the citizens, right? But one particular line is that I always point out is Effie calling it an honor to be a tribute. She's saying that you're essentially sacrificing yourself for the betterment of Panem, that to keep things in order, to keep the districts in order, there are children sacrificing themselves, which is an honor to bring pride to your district, which I think is absolutely insane, especially since the Hunger Games is a literal death sentence, especially for outlier, as Seneca Crane says at one point, outlier districts such as District 12. When Prim is reaped, there is silence across the entirety of the district. A young 12-year-old girl who is tucking in her little tail, as Katniss says, walking up to that stage before Katniss can realize what is happening and do something about it. Everyone is moving out of her way. They don't want to associate with Prim. They don't want to be going towards their own death sentence. Nobody's going to volunteer, except, of course, for Katniss, who is very protective of her sister. This brings us to when Effie says District 12's very first volunteer to Katniss, or to District 12 about Katniss. District 12 is portrayed as a weaker district, like I said. Seneca Crane named it the outlier, one of the outlier districts. Volunteering is highly unlikely from districts such as these, because it is a suicide mission. You don't want, you know you're not going to bring pride to your district, and nobody wants you to bring pride to the district, unless, of course, it's bringing a 12-year-old home and not dying. When Katniss gets to the stage and Effie says this, the district gives her a three-finger salute, which is supposed to be a sign of respect. We're not explicitly told what exactly it means, but we're left to assume it's a sign of respect. Her district is essentially wishing her luck, because they know that, or they almost know that she's not coming home. Next, of course, is the male tribute, Peter Malark. Our first introduction to Peter is a scared little boy who thinks, crap, I'm dead. I can't defeat Katniss. She has a better chance at winning, because we all know that Peter, from this moment, wants Katniss alive. This scene does trigger a flashback that we don't get more information on until we get to the train to the capital, but it triggers a flashback that telling us that Peter and Katniss are connected in some way from their past, which is an important note that, and an advantage that I believe that the two had, that they knew and cared for each other or were indebted to each other from the beginning. Although the two don't really know each other, even though they are essentially indebted to each other. Peter probably thinks he knows Katniss, but he's just been a little bit of a stalker up until this point, because he's never been able to speak to Katniss. After the reaping, Katniss gets a 3-minute conversation with all her loved ones. First is Prim and her mother, and then there's Gale later. This is not something I would necessarily consider humane from the Capitol, but when is the Capitol humane in any way? I would say this is the Capitol further marginalizing, oppressing, and stripping the district tributes of their dignity, showing them as animals. They're hurting them like animals. The Capitol wants to reiterate and all the time that they are just not equal to the Capitol citizens, that the district, they're different. One line I think is skimmed over in the movie is when Gale comes in and talks to Katniss, saying that she has a chance at winning. While Katniss is trying to just convince Gale to please protect my family, don't let them starve, Gale is like, you can win this. And then he says that Katniss is good with a bow and arrow. Katniss replies with that she's good at hunting animals. And he says, it's not different, Katniss. What do you mean it's not different, Gale? I'm pretty sure it's a little bit different. Gale here is literally going along with the Capitol, treating district people like animals. The children are not animals, but the Capitol thinks so because they think that the district people are below them, and Gale is enabling that. The cruelty and reality of oppression the Capitol really places on the districts is very evident through Katniss's family. Katniss is the sole provider of her family. Firstly, Prim. Prim is the 12-year-old sister of Katniss. She is going into her first games. You start when you're 12, like we said earlier. She's constantly scared and screams a lot. Prim's fragility as a character means her survival is greatly tied to Katniss. Without Katniss, she would starve. Prim's character also only really becomes three-dimensional when she's around Katniss. She really represents the innocence the Capitol is taking away from children by reaping them in the Hunger Games. The more we see Katniss comforting Prim as well, the more we see Katniss taking on a motherly role in replacement of her own very alive mother. One particular scene of Katniss taking on a motherly role is when Prim tries on a dress for the reaping and Katniss butts in saying, "Tuck in that tail, little duck." It's her way of constantly reassuring Prim that she's going to be okay, that Katniss is always protecting her, when her mother should be taking up on that role instead. But even when Prim and Katniss's mother try to take on that motherly role she's supposed to have, Katniss pushes her away, pushes her from prevents her from doing so. Although Katniss only promises to win the games because she cares so much for Prim, perhaps Katniss would not have even won the games, she would have given up had she not had Prim by her side. And I feel like this whole tribute volunteer thing is once again tying together their fates. None of this would have happened. Katniss would not have been the accidental hero had she not promised Prim or had to get back to Prim, because none of it would have happened. Katniss just would not have won the game. She probably wouldn't have even been in the games had she not volunteered for Prim, or had Prim not been around at all. We see Katniss's distrust in people around her through Katniss's mother and her relationship, which is cold and distant. Like I said before, she doesn't allow her mother to be a mother. Whilst the relationship is shown very briefly, it is very hostile and very cold. Katniss is preparing for what she thinks is the inevitable. Her mother abandoning her, her mother mentally leaving after her father died again. She thinks that she needs to look after herself. She needs to look after Prim because that's what she cares about. Katniss always protects herself. And Prim, obviously, but she's always been the person looking out for her. No one's ever looked out for her in return. She's always been very selfless that way, and that is something that has built her character into someone that would have been an accidental hero. I find that Katniss and her mother are also very uniquely the same. They have a lot of similarities. When Katniss is reaped, there's a shot of her mother, who doesn't even have a name, by the way. I tried looking it up. I can't find a name for Katniss's mother. Her mother, right, when Katniss is reaped, has a very defiant, very poker face expression. She doesn't want to show her emotions in the same way that Katniss doesn't. There's always some form of disappointment from the Capitol because they're trying to oppress, they're trying to take away hope. Katniss's mother has lost all that hope because she lost her husband. Katniss is slowly losing that hope because she distrusts those around her, and in that way, her and her mother are very similar. Katniss also seems to have a desire to have a proper relationship with her mother because maybe she even sees the similarities herself, because she begs her not to tune out again if Katniss dies in the Hunger Games so she can look after Prim. But she also reluctantly, but also wants a hug from her mother before she leaves, showing that she does express interest in having a relationship with her mother. She wants a present mother. Essentially Katniss's mummy issues, which I think is fair. Before we move on to the tribute arrival at the Capitol, we're going to be discussing a bit more about Katniss before the games, because the games can't essentially start as soon as we get to the Capitol. No, on the train. In the tribute parade, they're not even all of it, essentially. They're not even in the arena when the games officially start, when the manipulation, when the oppression, the marginalization starts from the Capitol. The games start the moment they step on that train. Katniss at this point is in survival mode. She has been for years. She hasn't been looked after by her mother. She's had to look after Prim. She's taken up on a parental role for Prim, for her sister. And her survival mode doesn't stop when she gets into the arena. We know Katniss has an overall main skill of a bow and arrow, which comes in handy later. It's use of foreshadowing. It's a use of foreshadowing as well. She has an interest and extensive knowledge in nature. In the books, she's supposed to be an indigenous. Her personality starts out a bit defeatist, a bit pessimistic of the world. She has a very harsh viewpoint of the world because of the harsh reality she has experienced at the hands of the Capitol. She has a distaste for the future, and she's just trying to survive and keep Prim alive. And despite her obvious connection to Peter, she's very avoidant of the tribute. She is very reserved. She does not want to talk to Peter. She doesn't want to relive those memories. The train and arriving at the Capitol. Katniss's avoidance of Peter is very quickly overshadowed by the dramatic introduction to Capitol luxury. This is the kind of luxury the two tributes have never experienced before. This showcases the very obvious class difference between the Capitol and the districts, especially District 12. The Capitol is flaunting their wealth and providing this luxury to tributes to kind of essentially oppress them even further, because they don't have the opportunity. Why would you flaunt your wealth when they're about to die? It's only because they want to show them that they have always had more. They will always have more. And the districts just don't have the resources to be able to take the Capitol over when look at all the abundance that the Capitol has themselves. Our first proper conversation with Peter is also on this train, where Peter asks if Katniss has ever met Haymitch. Obviously Peter hasn't, and he's very insistent on meeting Haymitch. He's going to be mentoring them, and Peter seems like he wants to survive. He wants to win this game. He's a fighter. Katniss is a fighter right from the get-go. Haymitch does not realize this. This conversation also triggers a flashback of Peter throwing burnt bread to Katniss, showing us that he is the reason Katniss survived from starving. She didn't starve to death because of Peter. Katniss would not be here without Peter. Haymitch Abernathy. Another proper introduction we get on this train is the mentor, Haymitch Abernathy, who is a former victor in the Hunger Games. He won the second quarter quill, the 50th Hunger Games. Quarter quill happens every 25 years. On the surface, Haymitch is a violent alcoholic and is trying to drown his sorrows, his trauma in alcohol, as much alcohol as he possibly can. And he has no faith in his tributes. He has watched how many people die, 24 sets of tributes die. How many? What? 48! 48 children die just from District, man. That just occurs, that's a lot of people, that's a lot of small children. Whoa. The line showing that he has no faith in these tributes, this is after Peter asks him how to survive, or how he's supposed to be mentoring them. Embrace the probability of your imminent death and know in your heart there is nothing I can do to save you. Thanks, Haymitch. That's really helpful. To say the least, Haymitch over the years and over his trauma has become apathetic towards the Hunger Games. This is also our very first true glimpse into what it means to be Victor. Despite having victory, you've survived, and that's it. Katniss, who wants to survive, is going to just continue surviving even after the Hunger Games. I'm also willing to put money on the fact that Haymitch likely tried his best to do something about the Hunger Games, because, and in Catching Fire, we know this, we know that he rebelled. And this is, oh my god, this isn't even in the movie, it's in the book. Why is he getting cross-mantled? Forget what I just said. But I'm willing to put money on Haymitch trying his best to rebel, trying to have the tributes win, but then gave up because they didn't, because it's District 12. District 12 is weak. And that's really not even their fault. It's because the Gapple from Minecraft. Sorry. The Capitol just does not give them resources. Eventually, Haymitch does agree to become semi-sober, and he comes around after seeing that Katniss and Peter are fighters. Peter is consistently trying to take alcohol off of Haymitch. He's death staring the alcohol as Haymitch drinks, but Haymitch has good reflexes and will never have his alcohol taken off of him. Scary, but true. And obviously Katniss throws a butter knife, and that welcomes the famous line, "That is mahogany." Effie Trinket, who is this speaker of the famous line, "That is mahogany." I can't say it as iconically as the actor. I don't remember her name, I'm sorry, but she's in Pitch Perfect, and I know that one for a fact. I love Pitch Perfect. Effie is someone we also meet on the train. She is the escort, the Capitol escort from the districts. She makes sure they get the tributes get accustomed to Capitol life and Capitol luxury, because these poor young tributes, they have never experienced such riches before. They deserve to have a proper Capitol escort showing them how to be civil and have manners, like Effie, who is a schedule obsessed, manners obsessed, appearance obsessed character. She's the Capitol. She's the epitome of the Capitol. She is quite vain and always fixing her appearance in mirrors, and you know what, who can blame her? That's how she's been raised, and you know what, when you've been raised one way, it's very difficult to kick the habits. So I can't really blame her. She's also very pro-Hunger Games. She's also hoping to get a promotion to a quote-unquote better district, because if she can bring up these tributes from District 12 to be civil, then she can do anything for the Hunger Games. Effie's appearance is clearly supposed to be comical. It's supposed to be a send-up of people who, the wealthy, who show off their wealth to clearly divide the classes, to divide people, to show that I'm not equal to you, I am above you. And that's the essence of the Capitol, and Effie's supposed to be the representation of that. She has the signature over-the-top line, "May the odds be ever in your favor," that Katniss and Gale mock at the beginning of the movie. This is the slogan from the Capitol about the Hunger Games, and it's an overarching theme in the games, in the Hunger Games, the whole franchise itself, that it's supposed to be odds, it's supposed to be fate, destiny, that sometimes the odds just aren't in your favor, or the odds just aren't ever in your favor. In Katniss's case, the odds weren't in her favor, but for the rest of Panem, her odds meant that she was at the right place at the right time. At the end of the day, whilst Effie is supposed to be a comical character, she is, in essence, still being manipulated by the Capitol. They're all being manipulated, and you have to come in with an understanding of that. Miss Effie Trinket has a very weird pet relationship with Peter and Katniss. It's like she's gotten these cute little kittens that she's able to raise. She has to teach them manners and teach them how to be on time and be civil in the Capitol and teach them about Capitol life. She continues to have this weird relationship with them throughout the movies. At the tribute parade, she says where all anybody is going to be talking about. She has an obsession with being perfect. This is very much the essence of the Capitol, once again, the Capitol citizens. Not to mention her fashion, Capitol fashion. Effie is someone we see very first, that the difference between the districts and the Capitol fashion. The districts are very dull, very old-fashioned, old-timey, and then the Capitol has anything eccentric, bright colors. Effie has huge wigs, and that's in fashion. I would almost compare it to drag makeup. Whilst we're not entirely told where this fashion in particular came from, we do know that it is the wealthy showing their wealth, because that's essentially what it's supposed to be a send-up of. But we don't know why there's always fashion trends. We know that fashion trends in our own world, we have them and they come and go. So these sort of fashion trends had to come from somewhere, but we still don't know. Even with the prequel, we don't know where it came from, because they dress kind of modestly in the prequel as well. Capitol fashion is just very exaggerated. Not to mention that there is dystopian technology wrapped into the Capitol fashion. With Cinna, he gives manufactured fake fire for the outfits of Peter and Katniss at the tribute parade. Their Capitol fashion is so important to them that they show off fashion and technology during their tribute parade. They flaunt them on the tributes like they're models. There is just no mistaking a Capitol citizen from the district, people. Katniss during the games. At this point, Katniss has definitely entered the games, and from this point forward, there is no looking back. Haymitch even points out to Katniss that she better hold on to the butter knife that she just tried to stab him with, because Peter is waving at the Capitol people, and he knows what he's doing because he's got that charisma. At this point, there is no escape for Katniss. It is starting to get dark, so if the quality of this video goes down, I apologize in advance. Cinna. When introducing the tributes to the Capitol for the first time, or for the first official time, there's a tribute parade, and each tribute gets assigned, that's the word I was looking for, assigned a stylist. Katniss's stylist is Cinna. Cinna is not necessarily anti-Hunger Games at this point, but he's obviously some kind of rebel. From the moment Katniss arrives at the Capitol, she's groomed like a dog. She has to be styled in the way that will be appeasing to the eyes of the Capitol, which also goes along with the whole animal metaphor, treating the districts like they're animals and not equal to the Capitol, especially if they're not groomed. The first thing Cinna states to Katniss when he meets her for the first time is, "I'm sorry this happened to you, and I'm here to help you in any way that I can." He is definitely pro tributes, keeping them alive and helping them in any way he can. Cinna is also the only character that we see that is actively rebelling against the Capitol in his own way until the later movies. You know, we don't see Plutarch yet. We only see Cinna. We don't see President Coin, only Cinna. He's the first essence of the rebellion. He's also a breath of fresh air around the eccentricity of the Capitol and the Capitol fashion. All he has is his gold eyeliner, which I would argue is very fashionable. That's actually really cute. The way Cinna is going to help Katniss is to not dress her up in a costume, but dress her up in something fancy, something nice, like fake fire, and make her the girl on fire, just so she can be paraded around like a show animal. But that also brings us to not only the beginning of Katniss being remembered by the Capitol in order to get sponsors, but the beginning of Peter and Katniss's relationship and their interactions outside of burnt bread. The pageantry of the Hunger Games, the tribute parade. The tribute parade is essentially dramatizing the television show and just getting sponsors for the tributes, because if the capital can contribute to the survival of a tribute, more betting, more money, more entertainment. Each district is dressed in the attire of something that represents their district. What I have here is what we get to know. District 4 is fishing, District 5 are power plant workers, and District 12, of course, are coal miners, thus the girl on fire. The tribute parade essentially integrates these tributes into capital society, not as people, but as circus animals to be gawked at. Caesar Flickerman himself so much as goes to the length of calling these tributes crop of recruits, which is dehumanizing. Fortunately for Peter and Katniss, they have Cinna and Portia on their side. Portia's a larger character in the books, but not so much in the movies. So fortunately, they stand out with their fake fire. They're not just dressed in black coal mining outfits. They're dressed up in what coal creates, and that can be fire. You can set coal on fire. We know that. Why did I reiterate that? It doesn't matter. Going slowly crazy. This is also the beginning of the capital people seeing them as people rather than circus animals, because they're seeing them not really dressed up in costumes, but rather as people representing a trade. Cinna's making them people by not dressing them up in costumes. At the end of this parade, what is most important is our first glimpse at President Snow. He gives a lot of really dramatic speeches, but throughout this movie, he's not too prevalent. Seneca Crane is more prevalent because of his importance in being a game maker. Rather, President Snow is taking a step back as an antagonist to become the biggest antagonist in the next 3 movies. He's supposed to be the mastermind behind everything. And at this parade is our first glimpse at the president and who will be causing the most havoc in Katniss's life in the future. After the tribute parade, we get more of capital luxury. The District 12 goes to a penthouse in the training center, the tribute center. I think it's called the tribute center. The tribute center is what I have written down. So that's what we're going with. They go to the tribute center, which is where they're staying. It's like a hotel with a training center underneath it. I've always assumed that District 12 gets the penthouse because they're the ones that always have the lowest chance of survival, not just in the games, but as a district as a whole. The weakest district. Starts at District 1 and works its way up. It's one of the areas that I feel like the capital's true intentions is given at face value, but Pan Am chooses to ignore it because they've been manipulated and groomed to think that way, that it's nothing. This luxury that the capital is giving to the districts, especially District 12, is kind of luring them into a false sense of security. You know, we haven't given you all of this luxury, now we're gonna love bomb you essentially with this luxury. We're gonna just bombard you with all of this. And they're kind of buying it as well, but honestly, if you've never experienced a luxury before, why not buy into the false hope? Training. This hope can easily come crashing down on them with probability scores. Probability scores are given to district tributes for the capital to place bets on them. It engages the capital more and provides it as more of a pageantry, more entertainment for the capital people. I would compare it to horse racing, how you bet on horses. Once again, comparing them to animals in the circus. Tributes have 4 days to train in the training center to gain essential survival skills, most of which are skills that Katniss, for one, already knows, but the career tributes, which are people, the kids from districts 1 to 3 in the books, it's also 4, where they train in special academies to volunteer when they're old enough, or once between like 16 and 18. Seneca Crane and other game-making officials also watch this, which is why the probability scores in the movies change, because they're slowly giving different probabilities of them winning depending on the survival skills that they're picking up during these 4 days. It's during these 4 days that Haymitch mentors his tributes, but because of that, Katniss and Peter are kind of more or less forced to stick together. They follow each other around the training center, going from survival skill to survival skill until Peter looks like a weakling and has to throw a weight to look impressive in front of the career tributes. They're also followed by their little shadow, Rue. We love Rue. We'll get more into her character, but she is kind of a symbolism and similarities, a mirror to Prim. That's what I was looking for. She's a mirror to Primrose Everdeen. Haymitch mentors them to not show their strengths until their evaluations. Their evaluations, that is where they get scored, right? And it moves their probability scores again. This also leads into an argument between Katniss and Peter about their strengths, but it's not how it seems. Katniss argues in favor of Peter and Peter argues in favor of Katniss, which is not really how they should be doing that. And it's kind of, in a way, rebelling in their own small ways that they don't even realize, because the Capitol doesn't want you protecting someone else. The Capitol wants you to protect yourself, not like how Peter's trying to protect Katniss. And they're bonded together forever through these compliments / argument. Katniss and Peter begin to develop a bit of trust in each other during these 4 days until they become kind of enemies again, because Peter asks to be trained away from Katniss, which I believe is Peter trying to set up for protecting Katniss and trying to get in with the career tributes. The last part of training is the evaluations. The higher the score, the better the skills. The better the skills, the more sponsors you have. This is Katniss's kind of first true act of rebellion against the Capitol in front of the Capitol. You know, she's been rebelling against the Capitol by going outside the boundary this entire time, but in front of actual official game makers who have such a big importance in the Capitol. This is a true rebellion, right? So she shoots, of course, an arrow into the game makers at an apple from Pig's mouth, thinking that she's gonna get a really low score as punishment. But this poses a potential threat to her and to the Capitol, so they give her a larger score. Scores that we do know from the evaluation is Marvel from District 1 got a 9. Cato and Chloe from District 2 both got 10s. Foxface got a 5. She's also from District 5, I believe, and I will continue calling her Foxface despite the fact that they don't call her that in the movie, because they call her that in the book, but don't give her name in the movie. They should have done that. Hopefully that makes sense. We also know Thresh and Rue from District 11. Thresh is a 9. Rue is a 7. Peter got an 8 and Katniss got an 11. Katniss's high score puts an immediate target on her back, and the Capitol almost knows that. There's a scene with Seneca Crane and President Snow of where they're having a brief conversation about how he should not have done that. And the power during this conversation is definitely in President Snow, and it shows us who the true antagonist is. Flickerman interviews. The night before the Hunger Games officially starts, Caesar Flickerman interviews every single one of the tributes and tries to bring out all their strengths, all their charisma, all the entertainment he can seep out of these tributes as possible. This character gives us the most dramatized version of television you can think of. Flickerman is obviously pro Hunger Games, and his blue hair obviously subscribes to the typical eccentric fashion of the Capitol. However, his outfit generally is fairly tame. He just has like a blue suit matching his whatever color his hair is, usually matches his suit as well, which is once again tame for Capitol fashion, but his personality makes up for it, so that's fine. Flickerman usually targets one particular attribute about each tributes that helps their strengths. I have written down here, Glimmer is sexy, Cato is strong. Glimmer being sexy is kind of weird for a minor. I'm just going to point that out, which goes in line with the Capitol in Mockingjay. Thresh is kind of stoic. Katniss isn't really any of those things. She comes off as kind of like giggly teenager, which she is, but she doesn't have like anything that really pops about her other than the fact that she volunteered for her sister Prim. Peter clearly comes in with that charisma when he, during his interview, confesses his love for Katniss, which is iconic. When it comes to brains and brawns, Peter's definitely brains and Katniss is definitely brawns. Whilst Candace's interview was mostly about being the girl on fire and volunteering for Prim, Peter's interview almost makes me think that the questions are predetermined alongside the mentors, because how else does Caesar Flickerman know to ask about a special girl back home leading up to Peter saying, "She came here with me," about Katniss? I don't think it like connects all the dots that Peter told Haymitch while he was drunk, thinking he wouldn't remember that he's in love with Katniss, and Haymitch, something clicked in Haymitch's mind and was like, I can save them, I can do this, I can mentor them into surviving, and then they choose Katniss together to survive. And then Haymitch tells Caesar to ask Peter about the special girl back home, leading into talking about Katniss. There is some manipulation, some like, Haymitch is the mastermind at the very, very beginning of the rebellion. I know that for a fact, and you can't prove me wrong. The eve of the games. This is where the reality really sets in for our District 12 tributes. The Capitol essentially treats this like New Year's Eve. It's a celebration, they're celebrating going into, it's a party, you know, and Peter is awake, not being able to sleep, watching this happen, watching them celebrate his imminent death or imminent murder, whatever, and Katniss can't sleep either, and they have a whole conversation about how apologetic Katniss is, and they kind of go from distrust to a little more trust, which I believe is the very beginning of that building of a relationship. They've gotten to know each other, but beginning to build a proper friendship rather than being acquaintances, people that they're indebted to for their survival. This whole scene is very important to our beloved Everlark. The reason I say that is because they don't have in-depth conversations other than surviving and the Hunger Games, and I don't think they bring up the burnt bread until later on, but they don't have conversations about how they feel about the Capitol, how they feel about their lives and their situation until this moment in the Hunger Games movie. Although very apologetic, Katniss still seems very reserved in the same way she was with Gale and his opinions. When Peter says he doesn't want them to change me, he doesn't want the Capitol to change him, referring to that. He essentially is stating his opinion. Peter is someone I don't typically see as someone or a character who states his opinions, his political opinions, speaks out against the Capitol, especially since he is technically on the wrong side of history because he gets captured by the enemy in Mockingjay. But he doesn't state his opinions very often, and this is one of the only times in the entire franchise that he openly states that he knows how the Hunger Games works. He knows how the Capitol treats its tributes, and he doesn't want to fall victim to that. I think this is an amazing addition to add Peter's political opinions in this kind of way, because it contrasts so differently to Katniss that they kind of complement each other in a way. They get to represent different ways in which you can rebel against the Capitol, and different ways characters are a part of the Capitol in rebelling, so on and so forth. Candace is the quiet one and Peter is the outspoken one in this duo, and Peter rebels against the Capitol not only because he's being outspoken in this line, but he gets to rebel in the way that the Capitol is expecting him to not save Katniss, but that is what he's doing anyway. Katniss's relationship with potential father figures. Katniss has very apparent trust issues, but she also slowly starts to trust and be drawn to male characters rather than female characters in the movie. In particular, Haymitch and Cinna are the ones that she deems as father figures or treats as father figures. She bonds very closely with the two of them in this movie. I would say this is because Cinna and Haymitch are protecting her and providing for her in the way that she's had to provide for herself for so many years, that she immediately drifts towards people because she wants to be protected and not have to protect herself the whole time. Cinna's own personal act of rebellion even is to treat Katniss as his equal rather than as lower than him because she's district. Both Cinna and Haymitch agree with her shooting the bow and arrow, not the bow and arrow, shooting at the game makers. Cinna doesn't think it's that big of a deal. Haymitch laughs at it, in fact, and that is treating her with respect in a way, and treating her as though her decisions aren't awful. And yeah, they're being father figures and acting as role models for her. Cinna's own line, and I'm going to read it out in a quote, "I'm not allowed to bet, but if I could, I'd bet on you." Once again, he's not supposed to bet, but yet he is putting his faith into Katniss, even though the Capitol is explicitly stating, don't do this, otherwise you'll suffer consequences. But he's putting his faith, he's putting his resources, he's putting his effort into Katniss surviving. This places Cinna in the short, very, very short list of people Katniss trusts, which is not something a lot of female characters get, or younger male characters aside from Peter, and kind of Gale, but not to the extent of Peter eventually. It might not seem obvious at first, since Haymitch and Katniss's relationship develops further in the Mockingjay movies rather than in the first movie, but he does communicate. Katniss and Haymitch communicate through notes in the arena, which is something that means that they both understand each other, understand what is meant by these messages, and that forms that bond between them, that they're very similar in a way, and that Haymitch is acting not only as a mentor but as a father figure to Katniss. This also means Haymitch chose Katniss to survive the games. He is putting his efforts into Katniss. Haymitch's relationship with the games. Now we're about to get into the games and into the actual arena itself, but we have to discuss Haymitch's relationship with the games because I think it's very important to the plot, especially since he was a past victor himself and he knows the true consequences of what being a victor means. Haymitch has a lot of trauma from being a victor. Obviously, he murdered children while he was still a child. In one particular scene in the Capitol, Haymitch is depicted watching children being gifted literal murder weapons by their parents because they're celebrating the Hunger Games. This is a very dark side of the games that we don't see unless we see Haymitch's perspective of the games, unless we discuss his perspective. It also means he's hyper aware of the punishments that Katniss is going to endure later in the movie. He knows what it means to go against the Capitol, make a fool of the Capitol. When he finds out that Katniss shot at the game makers, he knows that the worst that's going to come of it is that she's going to have a target on her back. And that's why I said earlier that she had a target on her back, because Haymitch implies it that he knows that she's essentially punishment enough already. She's going into the arena, but he knows that the way they're going to punish her is through trying to kill her, trying to get the career tributes. You know, later on, when Katniss strays too far away from other tributes, she's pushed towards the career tributes who are trying to search for her and kill her. And Haymitch is aware of that, and that's why they're doing it. Haymitch's relationship with the game is furthered because he is given a lot of exposition. He's good for exposition in the world because he's a mentor. He understands, once again, repeating myself, he understands how it works. So he tells Katniss not to go into the cornucopia because there's going to be a bow and arrow. And lo and behold, there is. And she aims to go for it before Peter tells her not to. One of his quotes is "stay alive," which is something he tells Katniss and Peter. Specifically Katniss, "stay alive." It's a quote that he can't give any more advice other than stay alive, because it's essentially up to Katniss's own survival skills at the end of the day. That she should not make a mockery out of the Capitol, and she should definitely adhere to the rules if she wants to stay alive, which is not what she does. And we all know Haymitch did not do that either. If you've read the books, you know about his games. Haymitch is also a first and true Everlark shipper. His extent of his knowledge of Panem and the Hunger Games means that he's able to communicate to Seneca Crane to change the rules. I think it's very interesting that he used this against the Capitol in that way, that in order to keep his tribute safe, he put himself at risk by changing the rules. Pushing against a rule that isn't supposed to move against the Capitol is a very dangerous thing that he could have done. It's under the guise of helping the Capitol, when in reality it's just helping himself and his tributes. It also puts into question whether he was a part of the original orchestration of the rebellion, that they saw a chance and Haymitch was communicating with other victors going, hey, what do we do about this? We can make something out of this. There's a lot more behind Haymitch's behavior when he's not being a complete drunk. During the Hunger Games, the bloodbath for entertainment. The arena is essentially a forest or wooded area with a cornucopia in the middle of a large field with a lake at some point that is also surrounding the plot at some points. Coincidentally, this arena is very helpful for Katniss, which is something I find is probably just for plot armor, not because of the odds being in her favor. Right place at the right time. I think Suzanne Collins likely just put it in just by coincidence, plot armor. That's why it's there. This section is essentially just going to be a recount of events with some added commentary, just to give context to everything else I'm about to start talking about with the careers and other tributes. The countdown starts from 60 seconds and immediately Katniss sees the bow and arrow and intends on beelining for it in the mouth of the cornucopia until Peter sees and is like, "Don't do that," and shakes his head, and which essentially distracts Katniss and she almost fails. I know Peter wanted to keep her alive and that's why he shook his head, but very well could have killed her in that moment. During this particular countdown, there's also shots between the capital and the districts. The districts is looking really somber, and while the capital is looking very celebratory, very excited to get their yearly entertainment. There are also random Gale scenes throughout this in the arena events that I'm going to actively ignore because they really don't add anything to the plot or the analysis that we're going through right now. So just know that they're there. I've acknowledged them and we're not going to talk about them again. Or Gale for that matter. He will be talked more about in future videos about in this series, but not this movie. As the countdown finishes, we see Peter run into the woods, Katniss go for a backpack after almost getting killed once and then twice by Clove after she killed another tribute that was trying to kill Katniss. We see Marvel and Cato immediately start killing people, and that is the entertainment factor of the bloodbath, that of course tributes are going to start just killing each other immediately, which is awful. But the Capitol love it, so they put them in a confined space almost immediately and make them run. It's not good. It's not good at all. As Katniss runs away from the cornucopia, she does bump into Foxface, which is dangerous for Foxface because of Katniss's evaluation score. She's terrified, and they very well could have killed each other in that moment, but didn't. Which, what does that say about them compared to the Capitol? They're better than the Capitol. After this, Katniss goes into immediate survival mode, trying to get as far away from other tributes as possible, which goes against the Capitol's entertainment, so they manufacture some fire using their dystopian technology that is only available to them. This shows the audience of Panem, not to us, but also kind of to us, that shows Panem the true capabilities and resources the Capitol has to destroy the district if they try to rebel against them and have an uprising against their oppressors. Minor characters with a big impact. Some characters that don't get much screen time but definitely have a domino effect against Katniss's fate and Peter's fate as well are Thresh, Foxface, and Clove, all of which had the chance to kill her, and Peter, and all of which ended up not. Starting with Thresh, Thresh only really interacts with Rue up until the point of the feast, with Thresh having the opportunity to kill both Clove and Katniss. Doesn't, just kills Clove because as Clove was going to kill Katniss. This has the effect of Thresh could have made his chances much better at winning, but let Katniss go because she protected Rue, which is once again against Capitol rules, against the Hunger Games rules. Why would you do that when you could end up dead, but you could slim down your make your chances a bit larger of survival? Clove's death is also very significant in this same scene because Clove, if not for her monologue, could have survived, killed Katniss, and then survived with Cato as well. And with that very slight change, that altercation going differently, she could have survived and either survived herself, or Cato Clove could have killed each other and the Hunger Games would have stayed the same, or they would have been a different Katniss and Peeta. They would have become the face of the rebellion instead. That's once again where our odds come in. May the odds ever be in your favor. It very easily could have been Cato and Clove instead of Katniss and Peeta. This pure coincidence of Peeta and Katniss surviving and going along with their star-crossed lovers narrative is furthered by Foxface in the way that she ate the berries and the Nightlock berries. Her significance comes after her death as well, after Katniss takes the berries. Without her eating those berries, without Foxface being Peeta's kill, they wouldn't have had the Nightlock on them. Or thought of the fact that because they killed Foxface, they could kill Cato with berries as well. They wouldn't have had the Nightlock on them to be able to trick the Capitol into letting both of them live. Once again, below the surface, if you really look at these minor characters, you see the pure coincidence, the pure odds of all of this leading up to Katniss and Peeta instigating an uprising against the Capitol oppressors. The career tributes and their hunger for victory. Going back to the Capitol forcing Katniss to be closer to the career tributes, we have discovered that Peeta is now with the career tributes. Oh no, Peeta, why did you do that? What we don't know up until this point is that Peeta's ultimately done this to protect Katniss. Katniss is beginning to distrust Peeta because of it, but you know, he's doing it selflessly. We see that Peeta is really concerned once they chase Katniss up a tree, which is something we didn't see earlier when he was ruthlessly killing someone who set a fire the night before. Peeta, you know, we thought you were one of them. We see his concern all over his face, and he is trying to protect Katniss continuously by making them wait, the Kree wait her out in the tree, you know, maybe she'll die of starvation. She'll eventually have to come down from the tree at some point. The Kree fall for this because they feel as though they need to kill Katniss, their biggest threat, the biggest target they have on their backs. You know, the career tributes have been groomed to kill for this entire time. They have to be the victor, so they take after the biggest threat almost immediately. And they think of Loverboy as the closest they'll get to Katniss, that he knows Katniss. So that connection both endangers and helps Katniss and Peeta. Peeta's concern with Katniss, however, turns out lethal for everyone involved. Katniss drops a tracker jacket nest on all of them, ultimately killing Glimmer, injuring Cato, Marvel, and Clove, and Peeta, because he not only gets tracker jacket stings, Cato slashes his thigh wide open, basically killing Peeta almost, if it weren't for Katniss's help. But before this can happen, Haymitch sends an ointment for Katniss's burns she got from the manufactured fires earlier. The note states, apply generously and stay alive, communicating their bond that they understand. Stay alive being brought back, it's a callback to Haymitch's mentoring, that what she's doing is right and she is bringing entertainment in for the Capitol because of the Star-Crossed Lover Act, and that, you know, Peeta's betrayed Katniss, and Katniss is also doing well in the survival area. We know a lot of exposition about what the Tracker Jackers are exactly from Claudius Templesmith, I think his name is, and Caesar Flickerman. They have scenes of commentary in between these Katniss trying to kill the careers with Tracker Jackers. As per my notes, Tracker Jackers are genetically engineered wasps by the Capitol, whose venom causes searing pain and powerful hallucinations, and in extreme causes death. In extreme cases, there's Glimmer. That's also where Katniss gets her iconic bow and arrow. She steals it before they take away Glimmer's body, and she wakes up still with it when she meets Rue. After Katniss has been stung by Tracker Jackers, she experiences minor hallucinations. She first experiences Peeta trying to save her, and then witnessing him be almost murdered, or to her knowledge murdered. Peeta, in doing this, definitely risked his life. In fact, he probably would have died without the help of Katniss. These sacrifices from Peter is something that Katniss definitely won't realize until it's too late. Unfortunately, we all know what happens after all of this from Tracker Venom. Although this does give her ample opportunity to trust Peter more, it gives her more reason to trust Peter more. Just accept help from the boy with the bread, Katniss, come on. Another hallucination she has is that of her father and a memory of her father dying. There's a bunch of hallucinations she calls back to. It was supposed to call back to when told her mom not to tune out again, and she experiences how her mother tuned out after her father's death in the coal mine, and this is really the only information we get about Katniss's daddy issues. And this is a particular scene I would not have understood at all if I had not read the book. So I don't know how people who are watching just the movie understand it. Skipping through some scenes with Katniss's and Rue's alliance, they decide they're going to blow up the career's supplies because they are so used to the luxury that they can't survive without the resources that they're given at the cornucopia, thus giving them a better chance at surviving. We're also given the 4-note Mockingjay signal at this point to just say that the two of them are safe. Rue goes over during this time that where they are, so in the meadow at the cornucopia, the careers are. Peter's by the lake. Rue knows this where she jumps through trees, and she knows that he is essentially dying as well. The District 3 boy, who is supposed to be a career but he's quite young and weak, he has gone and dug up the bombs from the platforms at the beginning, because they have bombs. If you step off it early, you get blown up. So he dug up those and surrounded the resources with those bombs because he's from like the technological sort of district. I don't exactly know what to call it, but it's technology. That's what District 3 does. With the Rue and Katniss alliance, simultaneously there's tension building up with Katniss wondering if Peter has survived. She's starting to care for him, wondering because if she wants to get out of it alive without the rule change from later that we get to later, Peter can't survive, but she's still worried about the boy with the bread because she's kind of indebted to him, or at least she believes so. But she's eventually showing more care towards Peter at this point, building their relationship, building that trust. Rue as a symbol. Not long after Katniss is successful in taking out the resources from the career pack, she discovers that Rue is not sending back her signals and thus is in danger. Rue is screaming for Katniss, screaming Katniss's name in the same way Prim screams for Katniss's name at the beginning of the movie. Tragically, this is where Rue is killed by the arrogant, smug Marvel from District 1. Luckily, Katniss kills Marvel in the process at the same time. I know we're supposed to have some sort of sympathy or compassion to the career tributes because they were groomed to kill people by the Capitol. But at the same time, Marvel killed Rue, so I don't know that I can have compassion towards him. In the Hunger Games, Rue is supposed to be a mirror to Prim because Rue and Prim are both 12-year-old girls, young and innocent, the innocence being taken away by the Capitol and the Hunger Games themselves. Unfortunately, only one had a sibling to volunteer in their place. Katniss, in her mind, treats them as the same person, even though one would not come out of the arena alive. There's also a callback to the beginning of the movie where I said before that Deep in the Meadow would come in would foreshadow later, or foreshadow, it would come back later. It's a callback to Katniss soothing Rue as she dies, the same way that Katniss soothes Prim after a nightmare that she was chosen to go into the arena to be raped. This song and this symbolism, the mirroring of Prim and Rue, shows us what would have happened to Prim had Katniss not gone in her place. To make matters worse, or kind of better, depending on how you look at it, personally, I think of it as worse because it makes me sad. Katniss zips up Rue's jacket and covers her in flowers and kind of a memorial for Rue, and it makes her look like she's sleeping, like she didn't have the injury she did. It looks as though she was never in the arena and she is still alive, showing Katniss's humanity compared to the Capitol's lack thereof. This scene is also where Rue becomes the Mockingjay, in my opinion. It's something that needs a whole video on its own with quotes from the book as well. But because Katniss does this, covers her in flowers, respects Rue's death, Katniss also does the three-finger salute to the camera, and then we cut to District 11. Someone in District 11, a man who is commonly believed to be Rue's father, because there's no father in Catching Fire to Rue, and we can only assume that the man who riots now in District 11 is killed for treason. District 11 begins rioting, killing peacekeepers, attacking peacekeepers, destroying stuff, just being all out crazy, but with purpose. Katniss didn't know, of course, that this would spark an all-out rebellion from District 11 and start sparks in the rest of the districts as well. In this sequence, Rue becomes a martyr to the rebellion and becomes the Mockingjay. But Katniss becomes a Mockingjay because she was the only one alive to fight in the place of Rue. After Rue has tragically died at the hands of the Capitol, Haymitch convinces Seneca Crane to change the rules. Surprise, the rule change now works in favour of Katniss and Peter. This gives Katniss the possibility of two victors and the star-crossed lover narrative that Peter so graciously set up for her. Katniss's choices to go looking for Peter really brings into question her true intentions behind her behaviour, whether she has feelings behind that or if she finds that she is indebted to Peter, that with this chance she is going to be able to bring him home with her, because that's essentially paying back the debt she owes Peter for keeping her alive when they were 12. At the end of the day, this is compassion that the Capitol is trying to exploit from both Peter and Katniss. The more Katniss plays into the star-crossed lovers narrative, the more sponsors she gets. Evident in Haymitch's line, or not technically his line, his note, "You call that a kiss," when Katniss kisses Peter on the cheek. Like, really, is that a kiss? I wouldn't consider that a kiss. The Capitol feeds off of their misery and efforts in order to survive together, which is really messed up if you think about it. And just as a side note, the pacing is so wrong during these scenes. In the book, I'm sorry to bring it up again, but in the book, they have days in the arena. The arena days are kind of messed up, but they have a long time. They're in the cave for a long time. And they're talking about stories, they're building their relationship. Yes, for Capitol entertainment, but they still do build trust in each other and more care for each other. So when Peter asks why she would sacrifice herself for the feast, it makes more sense in the book than it does in the movie, because Katniss is coming to care for Peter. The feast. The feast is an event that encourages another bloodbath and a lot more deaths for Capitol entertainment between children. It essentially comes into play when there are less tributes and too much space in the arena to push them all together without making it seem too manufactured by the game makers. Like I said before, Katniss insists on going and Peter is like, "Oh, why are you going? That's weird. Don't sacrifice yourself for me," because Peter wants to keep her alive. That's his whole point the entire time. At this point, I choose to believe Katniss's feelings are a little bit, no, not a little bit, really confused towards Peter, because she's risking her life for the boy with the bread when the only time she's only risked her life truly is for Prim. And I think this definitely shows us that how she shows trust and care for people, that she risks her life. She puts herself in danger in order to keep those around her alive. It doesn't matter how much she's playing into the oppressor's game, she's still going to risk her life because she doesn't know how to express those feelings in any other way other than in the most dire situations. At the end of the day, no matter her feelings towards him, she doesn't want to lose the boy with the bread. Because I said it earlier in the minor characters section, I'm just going to skim over this. Thresh kills Clove because Clove tried to kill Katniss and Katniss protected Rue, and Thresh is trying to defend or avenge Rue. That's what happens at the feast. There we go. After the feast, because Katniss has now gotten the medicine for Peter, the two love interests, the two tributes, the two freaking, I don't know what to call them. Katniss seems to be slowly trusting Peter, and they admit to themselves for the first time that they might be able to go back to District 12. The end of their hunger. The belief that the two tributes may make it back home to their district lulls them into a false sense of security as the end of the games approaches. This is the point where Foxface eats the nightlock that Peter was gathering and it had an intention to eat. But Katniss hears the cannon go off, obviously, before Peter has a chance to eat the nightlock. This is some genuine concern that she's gone through all of this effort to keep him alive and he is stupid enough to almost eat nightlock. Once again, this shows Katniss's fear of losing the boy with the bread. She truly does care for him at this point and is beginning to trust him since she did risk her life for Peter. Night falls over the remaining 4 for the finale, and these deaths go pretty quickly. Thresh almost immediately dies to some new mutts. They're kind of like cross from wolves and bears. They're weird looking mutts. Katniss and Peter run for the cornucopia and climb on top of it to see that Cato's already on top of the cornucopia. He then grabs Peter and tries to kill him, tries to choke him to death. But it's during this whole debacle where Cato has his last and final speech. Cato's monologue. Throughout the movie, we frequently see Cato death staring Katniss. He's seen as an angry, ruthless, and lethal career tribute. He's the one that you want to take out straight away because he could be the victor and you want to survive. Obviously. Who doesn't want to survive the games? But he's the only career tribute that we truly see change his mind towards the game, change his opinion, but obviously he ends up dead. So the Capitol got their justice immediately through his speech. Now his speech is as follows before he kills, or when he's got Peter in a chokehold, this is what he says. Go on, shoot. Then we both go down and you win. Go on, I'm dead anyway. I always was right. I didn't know that until now. How's that? Is that what they want, huh? I can still do this. One more kill. It's the one thing I know how to do. Bring pride to my district, not that it matters. Cato, in his final moments in the arena and in life, has finally understood how he was bred to and raised to fight in the arena, to volunteer, and to bring pride to his district. And I find it really unfortunate that he lived this life just to die in hopes that he could become the victor. In the end, his monologue is right, and he begs for mercy from Katniss when he's getting mauled by the mutts, and that's how he ends up dead. After that entire revelation too, like come on. After the games, Seneca Crane and President Snow as authority. With the rule change revoked, the Star-Crossed lovers are left with a decision to let their love story die a tragedy or show up and embarrass the Capitol and the game makers. As we all know, Katniss and Peter choose to show up at the Capitol and embarrass them, have them make a fool of themselves and be forced to recklessly and in haste declare them as the winners of the 74th Hunger Games, thus creating 2 victors when there was supposed to just be 1, despite the rule change. One thing I noticed when they're about to eat the nightlock berries is that Peter, and I'm quoting this from a TikTok, Peter looks, no, hang on, let me start again. Katniss looks at the world for one last time and Peter looks at his world one last time. Katniss doesn't realize the true consequences of the actions she just took until Haymitch, of all people, tells her. He tells her that she needs to act up the Star-Crossed lovers. You were so in love you couldn't help yourself. Not being with him was unthinkable. You would rather die than not be with him, and that is how she has to continue living from now on. And at the end of the movie, it is revealed President Snow is the true antagonist, the true dictator, and Seneca Crane is sent to die. He's locked in a room with only nightlock to eat, and he obviously had to eat it at the end of the day because he made a fool out of the Capitol. At the end of the day, he's the one that made the rule change. Seneca Crane made a fool out of the Capitol as well, and he had to suffer the consequences. To further the danger of President Snow in the coming movies, we have a lingering shot and conversation between Snow and Katniss when he's crowning Peter and Katniss the victors. He looks down at the Mockingjay pin and goes, "What a lovely pin," and Katniss says, "Thank you, it's from my district," and it kind of lingers there for a moment, a symbol of the rebellion. And I think it is good as time as any to go back to a quote from earlier that Snow says to Seneca Crane during one of the cutscenes. Snow says to Seneca Crane, "Why do we have a victor? Hope. It is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. A spark is fine as long as it's contained. So contain it." Katniss is the figurative and literal spark to the rebellion. The act of defiance against the Capitol sparked hope in the districts because Seneca Crane could not contain it. Peter and Katniss, love story or comment on humanity. Katniss is an accidental hero, but what we often overlook is Peter Malark and how he is also an accidental face of the rebellion. He might be guided to the wrong side of history rather than the right side of history, but that is completely because the odds were against his favor. Peter and Katniss's relationship is so important to this story because without the both of them, the rebellion just would not have happened. And this is something that I'm going to reiterate in the rest of this series because we're doing in-depth analysis of the rest of the other three movies. And it's something that develops a lot over time. A lot of Peter and Katniss's relationship is right place, right time. Once again, going back to the odds being in your favor sort of theme. So much would not happen without one another. Peter was chosen at the reaping, and so was Katniss. Katniss would not have been reaped for the Hunger Games had Peter not given her the burnt bread. And Katniss would not have been around to save Peter in the games had Peter not survived the games. Katniss and Peter both would not have been able to try and eat the Nightlock and then rebel against the Capitol in that, show them up. Without them both saving each other, none of this story would have happened. And their relationship is so much more important than just a romantic relationship being love interests. It's not just about them being love interests. And in fact, in the Hunger Games, they really just aren't. In the first movie, they aren't really love interests. Peter has a crush on Katniss, of course, but Katniss feels in debt to Peter for saving her life, so she saves his life, and the odds just were not in their favor at all. I think with Peter that it's often overlooked that he's emotional and he's weak when really he fights off Cato, he is charismatic, he can do the Flickerman interviews so much better than everyone else. Not to mention he also camouflages himself while in the arena because of course he has to put those bakery skills to good use somewhere. To once again reiterate the point that these two would not be there without each other, I think that these two, their relationship, their success in the game is due to their previous connection, their previous relationship, whilst not really knowing each other, whilst not having proper conversation with each other. They did have this connection that they were able to stand as a united front as District 12, representing District 12 in the games, which made them almost human to the Capitol instead of animals being paraded around in a circus for entertainment. They're showing very human qualities to make the Capitol feel emotionally connected to them. And they wouldn't have been able to do that had they not known each other previously. Their fate is almost intertwined the moment Peter throws her the burnt bread. They are predestined to keep each other alive in the games, in life. That their whole relationship, which is mentioned later in Mockingjay, which I will go into when we do that analysis, it's what they do. They keep each other alive, they look out for each other, they protect each other. That's what they've done since they were 12. And it gave them good practice to protect each other in the games. You know, once again, that wouldn't have happened if they had not known each other beforehand. Whilst Peter, yes, had a crush on Katniss because they're 16, teenagers do be teenaging, right? But I don't believe there was any romantic feelings on Katniss's part, at least, because they barely knew each other. You know, I'm sure that they cared, and I have brought this up with the character development for Katniss and Peeta this whole time. They were in debt to each other for saving each other's lives. There was care and then eventually trust, but there was no romantic feelings. That was they have the fake dating trope, you know? If anything, Peter's confession of his feelings during the Flickerman interview pushes Katniss away and makes her almost distrust him because she believes it's a ploy to manipulate her and throw her off her own game. Calling back to the eve of the games that I mentioned earlier, their relationship or their bond is solidified again because of the ways that they see the games. Katniss is in survival mode, but Peeta is seeing the humanity in the capital, in the districts, and how the capital controls that with the games. Peter's character is the comment on humanity, humans being humans, and the compassion that he has for people and for Katniss is something that the capital is actively fighting against, and him being essentially protecting Katniss is wrong in the eyes of the capital. He makes the capital see the human in the districts. In some ways, Katniss almost leaves survival mode after the feast because she realizes that she can maybe leave the arena with the boy with the bread and not be in debt for the rest of her life for a boy who saved her life. Obviously, she doesn't fully leave survival mode. She's definitely still in survival mode up until this point, especially since all the trauma she endured. But she does admit that life doesn't have to be what it always has been to her. This is her turning point, that things, the way the capital treats them, it doesn't have to be that way. Because of this, Katniss realizes that she can control that the capital has to have their victor, that they just won't have one victor, they'll have two, and thus changing the games forever just because of her relationship with Peeta. Katniss and Peeta's relationship is complicated on so many different levels. It has many layers of survival, humanity, and care for each other. Their relationship is based in protecting each other and based in trust. This trust that they didn't need the romantic aspect. Yeah, we have fake dating, we have Peeta having feelings for Katniss, but it's solely based in trust at this point in time. And this trust is something that the districts and the capital haven't seen before in the games, that you don't trust the people you've allied with because they could kill you easily. You know, there's one victor usually, so why would you trust your alliance fully? That's also why Katniss is in survival mode. In the end, Peeta's simple act of kindness goes a long way in developing a relationship that turns into a symbol for the rebellion. And unfortunately, he drags Katniss with him, and Katniss kind of was like, oh, what happened? No, I don't want this, but she does, because whoops, you're a good person, Katniss. And honestly, even at the beginning of the movie, what does Gale offer Katniss on the Reaping Day? Bread. So even Gale knows that the boy with the bread is important to... Ow, I just hit my hand on a chair in front of me where my laptop is. Even Gale is aware of the importance of the boy with the bread because he would have bought it from the bakery that Peeta worked at. Bread also is a symbol of kindness and humanity. Humans being humans. Panem, symbol of bread. Peeta is the most important character in this whole thing. Forget the protagonist. Forget Katniss. Peeta. We love Peeta. That's it. That's the analysis. That's it. Just Peeta. I started filming this at 2 p.m. It is now 8:47 p.m. the same day, but still, man, that was a lot. It's taken me so long to finish this. If you watched it all the way through, please like, please subscribe, comment your favorite theory, your favorite part of the novel, part of the book. Do you prefer the movie? Do you prefer the book? I will be doing an analysis series after this movie series analysis. I'm going to be doing a book series analysis. I'm planning for it. I'm excited. I love the Hunger Games. It's my favorite thing to do. I'm so excited, and we're gonna be getting to that soon. So I hope you enjoyed this analysis. Took me forever to film, and hopefully I think this should come out every 2 weeks, this series, so stay tuned for that. Maybe once a month. I have other stuff to be doing. We'll see what ends up happening, okay? Don't come at me. Also, tell me down in the comments below if you've made it this far, what you think of Peter and Katniss's relationship and the importance of that in the games and the rebellion in the future movies. Once again, I hope you enjoyed this video. I have been CJ, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!